Welcome to episode 4 MC Talk with Bret Worley. We're talking about consumer safety testing protocols in the industry with Dr. Sean Norris and Philip Snow. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Happy to be here.
So, over and over again in the hemp industry, we hear from regulators and the media and also from hemp and marijuana advocates about consumer safety testing and full panel testing and where do the raw materials come from. You know, Philip and Dr. Sean, both yourselves, you hear comments from, legislators and also from advocates and people that claim they know what they're talking about, but given overall safety of where the hemp industry is today, Dr. Sean, where would you position it on a scale of, 1 to food grade testing standards?
I mean, with regards to the full panel testing, it's food standards. All of these products are tested for more, if not better, standards for these possible impurities. So a lot of these limits that are allowed in the hemp flower are actually way lower than they're allowed to be in food products. So a lot of the fungus and mold and things, our limits are, I believe, 10 times lower than food product. But we match them. We beat those.
So we heard today, actually, ironic, both of us did in a meeting with a health department that, the system was set up to make sure that there weren't contaminants. And I find that phrase to be very interesting given, if the cannabinoid is pure, then it's pure, right? If we make everything in a food grade GMP setting like we do in the state of Colorado and it's free of contaminants, what could the potential issues be with an isolated compound? I mean, I saw the other day someone was talking about HHC. I always say HHC is the margarine to butter. What could be the issue of a pure compound that's found in the plant?
I mean, there is always the argument that they're going to throw out that, we don't know, it's in such low amounts in the plant that we don't know how it's going to affect the human body. But we do. We know enough of the endocannabinoid system that the effects that we're observing are traceable and known.
Right.
So while the exact effect of, is this going to get you a body high or just make you feel good or sleepy or whatever, might vary differently, but we know where these molecules are targeting, and all we're doing is making sure we don't have the contaminants that might be the pesticide of something just from flower.
So let's use like CBN, for example. So we isolate out CBN. It's 99%, right? Fairly easy techniques to get there, right? So that's all fine and good. There's no contaminants in the CBN, and then it's put into a soft gel, 50 milligrams, just like ours is, right? What does that do to your endocannabinoid system? Can you just explain what the ECS is briefly and how it regulates or monitors cannabinoids generally?
It's a very complex system that, admittedly, there are parts that aren't as clear. But we know that these endocannabinoids are a neurotransmitter. We have endogenous cannabinoids, for lack of ease of term, where what ends up happening is the CB1 and CB2 receptors uptake the cannabinoids.
So real quick, there's 2 receptors in your ECS, right?
Yeah,
CB1, CB2.
There are 2 main ones.
Yes.
I am not.
Dr. Norris, does every human body contain an endocannabinoid system?
Oh, yes. And
So every body has a highway to transmit cannabinoids. Is
Yes.
one way to look at it, yeah.
Yeah, it is a naturally occurring process for our body to uptake cannabinoids and have them in our
Isn't
body.
that weird?
Well, one thing I would ask, because A, I do find it very weird, but B, how long have we known this? Is this a recent development? Is this something, people say that hemp has been used for thousands of years rather innocuously. But is this something that we have just come to realize, by virtue of, research into the plant, research into our bodies, or is this something that we've known for a long time?
That's an interesting question because it does kind of bring up a little bit of a philosophy of how long we've known and what do we mean by what do we know? So people have been using hemp and cannabis for millennia and having these effects on their body. They knew it did something to them. And so it was cultivated, grown, and all of these things. So you could argue we've known that hemp has, good properties for the thousands of years. Getting into the specifics of the endocannabinoid system and all of these, it's relatively recently in the world of knowing things. In the world of biology, we've known about it for about I think 60 to 80 years is
30s, 40s, I think. 1930s,
Yeah.
40s, yeah.
Yeah.
Is when a lot of the research started, and then it stopped.
Yeah, it stopped due to the bans and the propaganda and all of that. But yeah, so we've had an idea that there is this system in our body for quite a while. But I'm not a biologist. I am not a, doctor of medicine. So my understanding is going to be, my surface level.
Yeah, but the reality is research started in the 30s or the 40s again. I don't know exactly the date, and conclusions were drawn in small models essentially, I would say. And a lot of that research got shelved for 7 decades essentially, and I mean, it's really not even unshelved. I mean, we don't see anyone talk about the research done from the 30s to 70s, essentially. It pops up like once a quarter, maybe. Someone will be like, did you know Delta-8 was found in 1954? It's like, actually, I did. But yeah, no one talks about it. I think Delta-8 was found technically before Delta-9 due to its stability being a little bit more stable, right?
If I remember correctly, they isolated Delta-8 first.
Yeah.
But couldn't get the position of the double bond correctly due to limitations of the time. And so it was misidentified. Or maybe it was they thought they found Delta-9 and it was misidentified. They actually found Delta-8.
I think that's what it was. But real quick, you just said double bond, so it makes me think of a question. Is this just real quick, what is the difference between Delta-8 THC and Delta-9 THC? Because that is something I do know, and I don't think a lot of people really know what the difference is, whether they're on the marijuana side or even the hemp side.
Yeah, and that is one of the things. It would be easier not on just a verbal position, but
Speak to me like a
out,
6th grader.
Yeah, so drawing it out, you have a molecule that has 6 carbons in a ring.
You've already lost me. I'm a 6th grader.
Okay. You have a ring just sitting there. You can have a stone on that ring at the top or on either side.
Okay, now I'm understanding.
So if you look at the stone on top, if you look at the stones to one side,
So if I slide the stone from the right side of the ring to the left side of the ring, I now have a different molecule.
essentially, yeah.
So essentially, one carbon bond flipped over,
Yeah.
mirrored, if you will, is the difference between Delta-8 and Delta-9 THC.
Yes.
Okay. So given that, why is Delta-8, and again, this goes to both you guys, why is Delta-8 legal under the Farm Bill and Delta-9 isn't?
Dr. Norris, you can take a stab at that, and then I'll do my best to fill in.
Yeah. The reason is the Farm Bill is written to be exclusive of any cannabinoid that is not Delta-9.
So the one with the ring on the right side.
So the one with the ring on the right side, and that's because it is, as far as we know, the main component of marijuana.
Right.
So they limited that cannabinoid because that is the major difference.
So when I grow weed at home, I'm mainly getting Delta-9 THCA.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
So it's interesting because hanging on the wall over there is a poster about reefer madness. And I think we were kind of talking about that as it's evolved over decades from the 1930s through the war on drugs that we saw, enacted in the 70s and 80s. And, all of a sudden we have hemp that became legal under the 2014 Farm Bill. And then the definition of hemp that you were alluding to was, drawn very, very expansively, but also very narrowly at the same time under the 2018 Farm Bill. And by virtue of, what Congress did in the 2018 Farm Bill, we saw them specifically state that hemp equals, the plant, parts of the plant, seeds, derivatives, extracts, isomers, and cannabinoids, provided they didn't exceed 0.3% Delta-9 THC by dry weight. And to that very well made point, Dr. Norris, you said that it is exclusive to Delta-9, and anything in excess of 0.3% Delta-9 by dry weight is marijuana. So whether that's 0.31, Schedule 1 controlled substance, 0.7, Schedule 1 controlled substance, all Delta-9. Now, anything under that could be 0.29, 0.1 Delta-9, but it could contain Delta-8, which is one of 120 naturally occurring cannabinoids within the plant.
That we're aware of.
Yeah, that we've identified.
Well, there we go.
Clarified.
But it could contain Delta-8 in quantities that would exceed that 0.3% threshold, but that's not captured by that definition. So to your question,
So we swing the ring over to the left, and it's now legal, and we can transport it over state lines.
provided it doesn't exceed 0.3% Delta-9 by dry weight, hemp under the 2018 Farm Bill, and again, all of its extracts, derivatives, cannabinoids, isomers, benefits from the luxury of interstate commerce, unlike its more potent cousin, marijuana, which is still federally illegal, yet widely sold in states all over the country. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Norris, earlier you mentioned CBN. Brett, you talked about we isolate that at 99.9%. Now, what does isolate mean? How does that work? I know, we can bring it down to a third grade or even a sixth grade level as it relates to, where that stone sits on the ring, but how does something get isolated? How do we end up with something that goes into a soft gel from a plant?
So there are a vast multitude of ways of doing this. So you can take just crude extract, which you can get by either solvents or just pressing hemp flower.
Like a squeeze?
Yeah, you can literally just squeeze the juice from the hemp.
The resin, if you will.
Yeah. And then from there, we can do a couple of different things to purify.
The better term, I think, in science is isolate's become a misnomer that isolate is a white powder in the industry.
Yeah.
And it probably bugs me and Sean more than it does most people, but purification's the proper term.
Yeah, because you are probably never going to reach 100%. That's just how science works. But you are just taking something already present and purifying that. Whereas isolating, you have an implication that you're necessarily taking things away, I think.
Yeah, and there's the two main ways of purification in the industry would be chromatography and then essentially isolation for that matter, or crystallization, which would be the right term, right? So some cannabinoids form crystalline structures and then they like to stick together. So if you put 60% CBD in a vape, it's going to start to crystallize because it'll form. And this is where the science comes in because he knows it better than I do, but it'll start to clump together, if you will. So then we can spin it really fast and throw off those crystals. And then you get like CBD isolate at 99%. But CBC at high quantities does not crystallize. So then you need to run it through a column, like chromatography column C18, silica, to throw, less so that throwing out the impurities, but essentially cutting off the molecular weight, probably.
Polarity is the actual
Polarity.
thing.
Yeah, polarities.
I
So
mean,
those are the two mains that we would do it in this industry is either chromatography, high levels of isomerization, even like really understanding your kinetics and your heat. And then third would be crystallization. But not every cannabinoid is the same.
yeah, no. So, I mean, distillation is
Another
one
effect,
of the
yeah.
big ones. And
Well, hold on here.
so
That make a lot of sense.
I got a C in high school chemistry. I went to law school because I suck at math. And at the end of the day, we're talking about.
Let's do this. Let's go through how Delta-8 is made.
Well, I think
Just simply.
One-
Because I think it's important for people to understand too.
that would help me.
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
I also think I get what you're getting at, but it'll be a little bit more clear with the explanation of Delta-8. So we take the CBD crude resin.
We'll start with biomass. So I'm a farmer.
Oh,
I just grew
yeah.
100 acres. What am I going to do?
So we,
Farmer Bret.
after they get tested and confirmed to be hemp, what they can do
Under
is
0.3% Delta-9 THC.
yes. And then it gets taken to a processor where they extract the crude resin of the hemp.
And we call it crude wood just because it's like kind of like a black oil, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I think it's
it's-
just a made up name.
It's just unprocessed.
Yeah.
So
raw.
just like crude oil
Yeah.
is crude just because it hasn't been distilled.
Yeah.
And so what we actually would probably do next is
Remove the fats and waxes.
remove the fats and waxes through winterization. So fats and waxes aren't soluble in methanol. And so once you cool it down, you can filter all of that off and you're left with a much cleaner product.
So
that-
just think about a funnel and you're just putting the oil down the funnel.
yeah.
And then you're gonna wipe off a bunch of those fats and waxes.
It's literally, I use a coffee filter if I have to do it here.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a really good point. So is this something I could do at home?
It's something that, marijuana extractors have been doing for the beginning of time. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is easily something I could go and play around in the garage for maybe a long enough or a short enough
I mean, you
amount of
look
time.
at those BHO labs, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
But yes, you can.
So
Yeah,
that's,
yes.
that's kind of what I want to get to is whether it be a coffee filter, whether it be something I can do in my garage, it seems as if it's relatively easy to do. But I think everybody sitting at this table's had pizza, right? Is that safe to
Exactly.
say?
Yeah, I mean, on our scale, you're talking about refinement equipment almost. So, I mean, you're talking about
And-
tankers of solvent.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
you're talking about an 18-wheeler driving up with solvent,
So it's
which
it's
blows up.
It's like pizza. It sounds like it's easy to make, but it's hard to make well. Is
Yes,
that safe to
exactly.
say, or it's
I
hard to
don't know if
make
I compare
under?
it to pizza, but
Not-
pizza can't
I-
explode and kill everybody.
Well,
I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that.
that's the organic chemist.
sixth grade.
No, and it's like, no, that's very, very true. Anybody can do this. I do want to clarify if I'm using a coffee filter, it's for research and not going into anybody's body. But I am,
Well, but the coffee filter's it's a good representation of what you would use, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like a Buchner funnel isn't going to mean anything to some of the people watching. So,
Exactly.
whether it's for R&D or for production, the reality is it's a really
it's
big
a really
coffee
big,
filter.
expensive coffee filter
No, that works well, too.
that makes
sense.
sure everything that we don't want stays on top.
Okay, so let's get back to this chart because I love going through this. I mean, and I haven't done it yet on the podcast. So then this is when we start running into some pretty large scale, actually traditional equipment. I mean, so is falling films and whatnot. But now we get into distillation after we've removed the fats and waxes.
Yeah. So after we've removed fats and waxes, we distill the product.
And what is
Which-
distillation? 2 sentences.
Distillation in 2 sentences is separation by boiling point, which most people can get an idea of, the easiest way to think of it is cooking with alcohol. When you add alcohol to something hot, all of the alcohol burns off and evaporates away, but you're left with everything else in it. That's because the ethanol has a different boiling point. So distillation, what we just do is capture the stuff that comes off as it boils away and recondense it down into a much more pure product. I think that's...
And usually what do you wipe off? Terpenes, what we call volatiles.
Yeah, so there's lots of different things that you might lose, terpenes or volatiles. It will also leave behind a lot of material because when we press this stuff, we're also getting plant matter. Granted, winterization and filtering initially removes all
So I guess
that.
for the math people out there, usually your crude's going to, depending on your biomass, but you're anywhere from between 50% and 70% cannabinoids on crude after winterization, and then anywhere between 70 and 85% cannabinoids in the what we call full spec, but the stuff that's been distilled.
Yeah.
So now after distillation, all the terpenes are gone, most of the smell's gone. A lot of the impurity, I mean, if you have really good biomass, you can be up to 95% cannabinoids after distillation, but normally you're at 75% to 85%. And that's when we would go, if we're making Delta-8, again, this is specific to Delta-8, then we go into what we call isolation or crystallization. So explain crystallization to a third or sixth grade. You got two of them, so you got to kind of thread the needle there.
So crystallization is a way of purification that is just how easily something turns into a solid in a certain condition. I know there's a lot of hand-waving vagueness, but what it is you hit a concentration and all of a sudden crystals will start to form because pure material wants to clump together. And so...
Like friends, you know?
Yeah.
They're hanging out.
Yeah, as soon as you get enough people, it becomes a party. They all crystallize and solidify together, pushing everybody else away.
The non-fun people.
And so...
like high school parties.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
CBD crystallization is just like the high school party.
I don't know if either of you have ever seen the heat packs that you hit a little metal tab in them and then it freezes, but it generates heat.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, it was worth a shot.
Sounds cool.
Oh, yeah, they're
just don't
very
know what it
cool.
is.
Or if you've gotten... Another way of thinking of it is if you've left a soda in the freezer for just long enough, you can take it out and open it and you watch it freeze.
Yeah, I know that one.
That's crystallization. That is the water crystallizing out of your soda.
Okay. So then once it crystallizes, obviously you're using pentane and all types of solvents. You get left with a 99% CBD isolate.
So once you
done properly.
start getting all of that, yeah, you're left with essentially white powder at the bottom of a vat as it's all crashed out. You wash the product with generally water.
So are the solvents still contained in that, or have they been removed somehow?
The solvents don't get into the crystal structure, so they just get pushed out as it's crystallizing, and then you can centrifuge it and decant all the solvent that's left over.
Typically,
And
you in CBD isolate, you off gas. You'll put it in an oven where because there's 2,000, 3,000
Yeah.
ppm, so you have to off gas the pentane usually used, or
Yeah, once you
sometimes they use
pour off.
heptane crashes, but those aren't as efficient, I don't think.
Yeah. There's a couple different ways you can get rid of the residual, but for the ease of simplification, a few processes go down and we are left with 99.9% pure product
So from
of CBD.
So from a legal perspective, one thing that I see, in different states across the country is you have to, produce a product that contains no residuals, no microbials, no heavy metals, no solvents, and no pesticides. Typically those 5 are found virtually in every regulatory framework regarding hemp-derived products across the country. So are all of those able to be removed and, to dumb it down, essentially non-existent if you know what you're doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've tested more CBD isolate than most people, and I've never seen any high levels of contamination in any CBD isolate, ours or someone else's. I mean, it doesn't matter who's really made it. The process, and I think it's really where I'm going with this long-winded example is the process is, of purification is pretty simple because, you go from the CBD isolate that's free of contaminants, and then you convert it over to Delta-8 with heptane and P-tilphonic acid, PTSA. And, as you say, how much PTSA do you put into a reaction?
I mean, a salt packet converts over 100 times its weight. So if you're doing...
That's plenty.
Yeah, it really goes a long way. And
water washing and neutralizing it is
Yeah.
pretty simple as doing 4 or 5 water washes. So, once you get to that CBD, which is important, is you start with a pure starting material, so you're going to get a pure cannabinoid product on the other side.
So through that,
What we call isomerization or derivatization.
So through that isomerization or derivatization, you get a pure starting material. Let's call it an input. And you take that input and then you convert it to something else. As a result of that conversion, or as a result of that next step in the process, it sounds like you can end up with Delta-8. Where else can you go from that CBD isolate? Or
Well, from Delta-8 specifically, just to not talk about all the cannabinoid pathways, and we talk about this quite often, is you go from Delta-8 to CBN, which is the top selling SKU outside of Delta-9, or the top selling blended marijuana SKU. So Delta-9 plus CBN, I think, is the top selling gummy in California. And, the people that don't like Delta-8, the first thing I say is your CBN was made from Delta-8. So if you got problems with Delta-8, you got problems with CBN. But the reality is, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this process is not foolproof, but it's not, if you're a doctor in organic chemistry or a doctor in synthetic chemistry, pretty easy process, really, for a trained professional. That's the way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. For a trained professional, this is day to day. I've done hundreds of these types of reactions in graduate school.
And real quick, just to go back to the 6th grade, this isomerization process sounds crazy. PTSA, where else is this used? In food or vitamins, anywhere outside the drug world?
Oh, yeah. In a lot of synthesis, if I remember correctly, it's used in the synthesis of margarine from butter. Mm-hmm. It's in children's cereal and fortified vitamins, where, making the vitamins to fortify cereal is using PTSA. There's
And to go even more broadly, a synthetic, what we call an isomerization, derivatization, or even a synthetic conversion is common in how much of your food on a day-to-day basis?
Besides the point, that's how you digest it.
Besides that,
it's daily. Everything we consume has had.
So is it just ultra processed? I started hearing this word ultra processed food. Is it in regular processed food, ultra processed food, everything outside of something organic?
If it didn't grow directly from a plant.
So if it's not
if it
fully
has
organic, preservatives,
I'm guessing those preservatives are all synthetic, unless it is very specific. Like, a company will have to go out of their way to try to avoid anything with synthetic molecules, and would probably fail.
So anything that's processed is got synthetic molecules in it then. So So synthetic's not bad then.
Not at all.
So what do you say to someone that says, Delta-8's dangerous because it's synthetic?
They have no basis in that argument.
Oh, so you're telling me that they're not organic or synthetic PhD chemists?
No.
Oh. I've been listening to this whole time on LinkedIn.
I know.
Should have just called you. That made things easier. Okay,
so if these are a result of some sort of a synthesis, let's say, the same synthesis that occurs naturally within my body when I'm digesting food or is it fair to say that you can create, like you said, vitamins? Or what about sugar? How do we get to the sugar that I put in my coffee every morning?
Sugar granule, well, high fructose sugar would be synthetic.
It depends. I'm not whole on the high fructose of how they make it.
Okay, well,
But-
help Philip get to his coffee, his creamer.
So
With that.
your like normal sugar, just because this is going to cause an issue with my brain, your normal sugar is 50% fructose. It's 50% glucose, 50% fructose. That's what normal table sugar is. High fructose has 55% fructose,
It's only 5%.
45% glucose.
Things that you don't know.
It's to me, it's a misnomer.
Oh,
but
yeah, so that's just
it's just
for the record.
yeah. That's just it was going to bother me.
Booger,
it being
big sugar,
brought up.
don't come after us. We have no beef.
No beef at all. I enjoy the high fructose. I'm not avoiding it.
Okay, so let's third grade, sixth grader. Let's just go to the vitamins. Vitamins are in everything.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fortification of vitamins. That's a better question. So how do you get to what isomerization or derivatization or process like in Nebraska? You're talking to the chairman and he asked you about the Kellogg's plant down the. Let's walk through that.
Yeah. So most of the time, vitamin fortification we can't generate enough from natural sources.
Right.
And so things like vitamin C, which is ascorbic acid, has a synthesis that has been figured out. I don't know it off the top of my head, forgive me. But it uses
But real quick, are
solvent.
all synthetics the same as long as you produce them pure? I think this is another thing that I saw the other day is a molecule no matter way it's produced?
Yeah. So if I say we're adding ascorbic acid to a food product, which is in almost anything as a preservative, which they're allowed to call a natural preservative.
So you can call a synthetic vitamin C a natural
Yes,
because it's bioidentical. if you
yes,
will.
exactly.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
once we get to the point of bioidenticalness,
Can you give
we're
me
fine.
a second grade explanation of what bioidentical
Yeah, good idea.
means?
So if we look,
We're kind
at-
of going all through elementary school. I apologize.
We're
We're
gonna
hopscotching.
have to do another episode. This is a lot of teaching here.
A lot of hopscotching around.
Yeah, no, I am perfectly fine talking about this. So every molecule is identical in configuration if they are the same molecule. Does that make sense?
Pretty much,
So-
if vitamin C is 99.9%, which you would still have to purify out of nature, and then you make it synthetically and purified, it's 99.9%. It's the same thing, and you can't tell the difference by any means, right?
Within reason,
Within reason.
yes, they are identical to each other. To the point where if
Point where you can call it natural in food. I think that's the
Yeah.
headline here. Is if we were the food industry and we synthetically made, let's just say Delta-8 is vitamin C, right? In this scenario, Delta-8, if produced the same way that nature produced it purely, would be natural.
yes,
Does that make
So
sense?
the Delta-8 that is naturally occurring within the cannabis plant, maybe not at high levels, but the Delta-8 that is there, when you take that pure squeeze, it would be logical to say that that's the same Delta-8 that is a result of the process that we described from
Yes.
beginning to end.
yes, that's exactly what we mean.
And I think the important thing here is you, and you said it earlier, is you can't make enough of vitamin C. So you have if there is demand or consumption for vitamin C, you either say screw you, you can't have any more vitamin C, or pay $10,000 for your vitamin C, or we'll go find another way. So people want Delta-8, it's legal. We have to figure out a way to make it. People want CBN, we have to make it. People want THCV, so we have to make it. People want CBC, so we have to make it. And that's the conundrum that I don't think people that are, let's just call them marijuana advocates, understand is say whatever you want, but there's a demand for it, so let's make it safely, effectively,
Yeah.
in a GMP setting, whatever it is, and let's make it bioidentically.
Provided, would you say so far as it's naturally occurring within the plant?
I don't think we know what's naturally occurring. So for the time being, I can concede that because I'm not, it's not a worthwhile argument. But I think there's thousands of plants, especially after we crossbreed. I mean, like, is crossbreeding marijuana plants natural? In theory, no. But all these strains, unicorn piss is a genetic mutation of, different seeds that have been crossbreeded. So there's what I'm saying is that's going to make more cannabinoids. Every time you crossbreed, you're going to end up with CBL or CBE or CBC or whatever it is. I mean, I saw something that came out of the ground the other day that was 7% CBC, straight out of the ground. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying is this is going to keep happening as people genetically mutate the plant over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Just like corn or anything, you're going to end up with higher amounts of some stuff that we never knew about. I mean, KCA Labs can test for 66 analytes. That's half the ones that we know about. So we can't even test at a commercial scale for these things and then add on the hundreds that we don't know about. I mean, my good friend, Dr. Osoli, that works at Ole Miss and has his own labs, Osoli Laboratories, has identified half these cannabinoids. And I bet if we called him right now, he'd probably say, I have no earthly idea how many more are in the plant. So,
Oh, yeah.
especially as we continue to genetically manipulate or genetically breed, additional plants.
And not to mention, as soon as we start looking more for them, because
There's been no money dumped into this. So who's running NMR and mass spec and additional separation to separate out all these things? No one is.
No, I'm also just talking about fairly recently there was an article of CBD discovered in a different species of plant.
Oh.
So a lot of these naturally occurring cannabinoids have different uses, and they have risen throughout the world. And so we don't even know what's out there in some weird strain that it could show vastly different properties.
I think one of our friends has said before that, and this isn't exactly what you're saying, but the hemp cannabis plant is the most diverse plant through aromatics, utility, and potential, functional relief benefits than any other plant on the planet. It's also the only plant defined by a number that's split into two, marijuana and hemp.
I think it's the single plant that we know of, or at least from a regulatory capture perspective, it's a single plant that is defined during its last 30 days of flowering by a tertiary metabolite.
Yeah.
And, obviously I can regurgitate that and sound really smart, but you might be able to add a little bit more color as to what I mean by that.
Yeah, so what that kind of means is when we harvest hemp, we have a time limit on what compounds are going to be present in that plant. So, like was mentioned earlier, marijuana grows Delta-9 THCA, which a lot of people don't recognize that, even if they're buying marijuana because it just says THC. But no, the flower has the acid form.
Real quick, what is the difference between the acid and the non-acid? Because a lot of people do not know the difference between Delta-9 THCA and Delta-9 THC.
So Delta-9 THCA is generally considered a precursor molecule, where
And precursor in this circumstance means it's just grown in the ground, right?
Yeah. And so once the plant goes through the process of making the cannabinoids, it goes through and has the acid form. It's just how the plant makes the molecule. If you really want to get into the plant biology, it makes it more soluble. So it's easier to process things when they're soluble in solution, but that's what we're doing. And
Delta-9 THCA is non-psychoactive.
No, it is
until
not.
heated, and then it turns Delta-9 THC, and the acid bond drops off.
Yes.
So Delta-9 THCA in isolate form, let's call it a powder. If it was just
Purified powder. I mean, they're all different names again, but yes.
If there was Delta-9 THCA sitting on this table, let's say, and I ate it, would it have, any sort of an effect on me and my body?
Your joints might feel a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a very good anti-inflammatory, but no, there is no psychoactive or intoxicating, whatever word you want to throw off there.
So when you mentioned earlier that, Delta-9 THCA converts, or that's what's advertised on marijuana products, what am I missing? Why are they advertising one thing when it's really not that?
And so the process in which you decarboxylate the THCA lowers the amount of active molecule you get. So if you are given 100 milligrams of THCA and you heat it up fully to decarboxylation, you get 87 milligrams out.
0.7.
Yes, 87.7.
So is that why when the USDA talks about its testing requirements, it stipulates that you have to account for that decarboxylation using a chemical conversion factor of Delta-9 THC times 0.877.
Delta-9 THCA times 0.077.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I forgive you.
So all this alphabet soup really matters.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. You drop off an A, and next thing you know, you're trafficking Schedule 1 narcotics. The difference between Delta-9 THCA purified and Delta-9 THC is, over state lines, you're a criminal. Federally.
Got it.
So Delta-9 THCA, this is what's really going to shock people's mind, purified with below 0.3 Delta-9 THC is hemp. I hate to break it to everybody by federal definition.
Yep.
And because a lot of people don't know the chemistry or don't know the molecular names, it really confuses people quite a bit.
Yeah.
But that is the reality. Until heated, the plant is hemp. I guess that's a different way to even look at it. Is until that thing gets heated up and you're free of non-acid varieties of the plant, it's all hemp.
Yeah. But what you're saying with tertiary metabolite,
That's
that
where it becomes important.
THCA is that tertiary metabolite. So, that's the secondary metabolite. D9 THC is the tertiary metabolite. It's the third step in the process of the synthesis in the plant.
So, one, you just said synthesis in the plant, but what's the first one?
So it starts with
CBGA.
CBGA.
I can answer for you.
And it's like I always get it mixed up.
Yeah, so CBGA is the mother.
Yeah,
That's
and then you
what
go
people refer to.
CBD.
Yeah, you either go CBD or THC.
Yeah.
For now, until again we crossbreed things and find new pathways. But
It's
it's a synthesis from CBGA to THCA.
Yes, in the whole scheme of things, all of the chemistry that happens in your body is synthesis. So your body is making different things to use. The hemp plant is making these CBGAs, CBDA, THCA, THCs as pesticides, honestly.
So hot take, unregulated synthetic hemp. I could just say your body's unregulated, synthetic digestion.
They have made Delta-8 through simulated gastric juices because they believe ingestion of Delta-9 through the stomach does convert into Delta-8 over time
Because that's
in your stomach.
it's thermomolecularly more stable, right? Too. So as you heat it, it wants to go to Delta-8.
So yeah, it's the thermodynamic product.
So your stomach
it's-
heats up the Delta-9,
Well,
and
It's also acid.
it's also acid.
We make Delta-8 from CBD, acid and solvent, heated up.
So there's a chance to everyone that's consuming Delta-9 THC that your body is using a synthetic reaction when consumed, and you're creating Delta-8.
Yeah. CBD is actually probably more likely. If you're taking CBD pills, you probably get a little bit of Delta-8 because that is the conversion
I
process.
don't know if I've ever. I know I've seen that in literature. I think there is some science behind that, but I've never heard anyone actually say it out loud.
Yeah,
It's kind of fascinating to hear.
it's extremely low.
Right.
I mean, your stomach is not ideal for it.
Yeah.
But no, it is.
Well, you need to have a contained reaction.
Yeah.
That's a little uncontained. You're not monitoring the thermodynamics of the reaction, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
So that's important, right?
Yeah.
Monitoring the thermodynamics of the reaction, making sure these are being made in, safe, sanitary, controlled conditions, and to bring us back to our original discussion point of consumer safety. So is the best way to obtain, any of these cannabinoids, by doing it yourself? Is it best to trust someone who has access to all of the fancy coffee filters, all of these different things?
it's.
I have a couple.
So how do we know essentially where to get this from?
I mean, of course, you can trust MC Nutraceuticals, but
Shameless plug.
yeah. The big thing is looking and verifying COAs. Any actual, well reputable hemp source should have COAs available and present for you.
Yeah, I'd suggest, looking at making sure that number is as high as possible in anything, whether it's, one thing I say to a lot of people is when you see Cat 3 Delta-9, it's like 85%. It's like, well, what else is in there? Now, hopefully it's just the fact that they're just other cannabinoids, but look for that percentage and see how high it is, because you want to be at 99%.
Oh yeah, you want to be able to take into account what's in that product.
Yeah.
And if you're getting an isolate, it should be testing that high.
I mean, chemistry is math.
Chemistry is math.
As close to 100 as you can.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Is understand the C of A, and I think there's stuff on our website. I think you're writing some more blogs on the website too to really understand what you're looking at. But there should be a number, and it should be close to 100. Is the reality when you're looking at if you're a consumer and you're taking this, or if you're a manufacturer. I mean, there's probably more manufacturers that watch this than consumers. So look for that number, and something I think I challenge everybody with as we wrap up is a lot of things are synthetic. Your body's doing synthetic reactions. And, if you really want to understand the chemistry, actually go understand it rather than just assuming what you've known for the last, 14 regulated years in marijuana. Hemp is lucky, and we're blessed to have less restrictions, which has allowed us to do more research and create cool things. Again, CBN, THCV, CBC, all made through isomerization, derivatization, or synthetic processes. Mm-hmm. Creating Delta-9 THC from the Delta-9 THCA acid is a synthetic process. The process of the CBGA in the plant to Delta-9 THCA is a synthetic process. So I think being more open-minded in the industry and also more understanding of what's going on, which is our job, obviously. So, I think episode 5, we might have to be back because there's a lot more stuff to go.
My head's still spinning.
So that's the end of episode 4. We'll be back next week with probably episode 5 with Dr. Sean Norris and Philip Snow. Thank y'all.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you.